Boston Mayor Marty Walsh and some of the city's top educators and advocates joined together today to formally speak out against proposed changes to Title IX. That's a federal law that prohibits sex discrimination in education programs and regulates how colleges handle accusations of sexual assault and harassment.
Secretary DeVos' proposal to change Title IX would be devastating for survivors of sexual assault. We believe survivors, we believe women, and we believe they deserve more support and more compassion, not less.
Under the Obama administration, when schools were investigating a student accused of sexual misconduct, they were required to use the lowest standard of proof, known as preponderance of evidence, in deciding whether that student violated any code of conduct. But the new rules proposed by Education Secretary DeVos would let schools decide whether they want to raise the standard of proof and require what's called clear and convincing evidence to take action. The proposal also changes the definition of sexual harassment, defining it as, quote, unwelcome conduct on the basis of sex that is so severe, pervasive, and objectively offensive that it effectively denies a person equal access to the recipient's education program or activity. A high bar. So today, Walsh said he and several local college presidents are submitting formal public comment in opposition to these and other changes outlined for Title IX. And he said in this area, they're going to keep investigating sexual misconduct claims just as they have always been.
No matter what happens in Washington, we are not going to go backwards in Boston. The Boston Public Schools' commitment to preventing and addressing sexual misconduct is unwavering. Our policies and protocols will continue without any changes. And our schools will continue to respond immediately and thoroughly every time a student comes forward.
Joining me to talk about this issue and more are a pair of presidents from two of Boston's premier institutes of higher education. Lee Pelton is president of Emerson College. Good to see you. Roger Bound of Berklee College of Music. Good to see you, too. You were there. What are your major concerns of what DeVos is proposing here?
Well, I think the headline has to do with the ability now to have cross-examine folks in a live hearing.
It's an adversarial proceeding, which it was not before.
Right, and so that the requirement is that both parties can have an advisor, and that advisor, in fact, can be a lawyer. So you would have a situation now where a lawyer is actually cross-examining, a hostile witness, as it were, in a setting that has the potential of re-traumatizing the survivor.
But isn't that the definition of due process, your ability to confront your accuser? Because the consequences, while they're obviously serious for survivors, they're pretty serious for those who end up on the other side, particularly if they're found to be liable or guilty of this.
Well, there's no law that says you have to do that. Mm-hmm. The basic fairness says
because it's not a court proceeding.
Yeah, because you have a complaint. The complainant has to know what that is. You have a hearing of some kind, and then there's an appeal. And so the process that we've been using before today was an investigatory process that we could talk about, but it does not include a face-to-face live hearing.
Do you have problems with these changes as well?
I'm very concerned about the one Lee mentioned because our number one goal is to make our campuses safer. And one of the ways to do that is if someone has been harmed, we want them to come to us and report it. But we know from the criminal justice system experience if someone feels like they're going to be cross-examined and humiliated or shamed, they may not come forward. And our current process is in a single investigator process, but that investigator gives the complainant and the respondent a chance to respond to one another's testimony. So it's not like you don't get due process, it's just that you're not in a room interrogated under fire by an attorney.
You know, both your schools were in the headlines. You terminated, 11 faculty over 13 years for some sexual misconduct. You suspended for a semester a pretty high-profile guy who ended up taking his life subsequently. Would you have been able to take the disciplinary action you took in both cases had the new proposed rules been in effect? Would they have inhibited your ability to do what you thought was the right thing, Lee?
I don't think so. There's a lot of words.
Hypothetical, I know.
Yeah, but I don't think so. I think we'd be able to do and would do what we did.
How about you?
I think the big concern is would people have come forward with the complaint in the first place? And we know from studies that a lot of people feel like they have been abused who don't come forward. So that's our big concern. The preponderance of evidence issue, I think, is not going to be a big issue because they give you a choice, and so the college can make whatever it believes is the right choice. Are some
college presidents who don't speak out about this sitting in their offices saying, frankly, this is a good thing. It insulates us more. It makes us less potentially. It really not only it creates greater rights for the alleged perpetrator, it provides greater insulation, sort of ironically, for your institution.
It limits the scope of issues for which you're liable. But, for instance, right now it implies that only issues that happen on a college campus would be subject to these regulations. But what about students who live off campus? What about students who are on a trip together? So I think how you define, especially an urban campus, needs to be fairly broad.
Well, it also raises the bar on what constitutes knowledge, a college or university knowledge. And here it says it's only the institutional knowledge can occur only when there is someone who has the capacity to correct the misbehavior. Then that's institutional knowledge. Other than that, it would not be.
Putting the new regs aside for a minute, are there more things, you mentioned safety a minute, which is one of your primary jobs, obviously. Are there more things you should be doing, putting aside what Betsy DeVos does, to make sure that kids not only are safe but feel safe on your campuses?
Well, absolutely. I mean, I think
like
the things that we're doing in Emerson, and I'm sure the things that Roger's doing at Berklee, is making just enormous investments, both in providing support and help for people, men and women, and also having a really robust Title IX office. And so I think I actually think we're doing a good job.
One last thing about this. I know what your answer is in light of what you said about the criminal system. I have been amongst those, I don't do what you do, who say these are alleged crimes. And if there's an alleged crime perpetrated against a survivor, whether most often a woman, but occasionally a man, why isn't, you're not criminal investigators. This isn't what you do for a living. Why shouldn't they do what someone who's not a student at Berklee or Emerson do and go to the cops, go to the DA,
They
and
should
file
do
charges?
that if they choose to. And we make sure every student knows they have that right. And for certain, like if someone has committed a heinous crime, even if we find them responsible, the limit of what we can do is expel a student from our campus. So there are certain things that should go into the criminal justice system.
So they're not mutually exclusive, but you think you have to play a role.
All.
Why are you making a face at me?
Well, I'm not making a face. I've been doing this for almost 40 years.
Yeah,
so
I know you have.
It's as Roger says, that's always an option. The evidentiary threshold, though, in colleges and universities is different. And so a lot of these cases that students want to report to the law, they're not gonna hear them. And I would prefer not to be in this business, but we can't be because the federal government says we can't be.
Okay.
We have to hear this.
Can I change the gears just for a second? Last night I did a commentary about these stunning numbers about food insecurity on college campuses, and your places are not cheap. My kid went to your place, so I know firsthand. One of my kids did. What are you doing? I mean, the food insecurity, I hate the term because it's such a euphemism. I mean, kids are hungry. They argue anywhere from 10 to 20% of the kids who are in colleges, private colleges too, across the country, go to bed hungry. What are you doing about this?
Well, what we're doing is setting up a program with our current, food provider with students who can actually bank some of their excess meals that other students can have access to
for free.
For free. We thought about developing a food bank, but we decided not to do that because it became clear that we already had the wherewithal to do this in a way that's invisible. And that
are you seeing the problem, though? I mean,
yes,
everybody says the obvious that it affects performance and graduation rates.
We are, absolutely.
What are you doing? Anything about this?
Well, as shocking as that is, I think the bigger issue is student debt. And they're all wrapped up in the same thing. We've had students who we found out were homeless, living in someone's car or couch surfing.
So what are you doing about the debt thing?
We've created a program for upper semester students in good standing where we've given them millions of dollars of additional financial aid. We're counseling people who we think can't really afford a four-year private college to go to community college first because we have articulation agreements with some community colleges. So we've got a whole system. It's a complicated system, but I think the key is to help people graduate on time with less debt, and while they're at the school, have a place to live and food to eat.
Afford it. We only have a minute left. For those that don't know, you occasionally take strolls together, as I'm aware.
Yeah.
So in your strolls with this guy and yours with him, what's the number one challenge you're facing in 2019 at your place? Quickly, if you can.
Just the one I just mentioned. How
Affordability.
do we help students? Both of our schools attract really gifted and talented students who don't come from affluent families. We're both proud of that. How do we make it possible for those students to succeed?
What's yours? What are you telling
The
him?
same access and affordability, and both of our institutions have a relatively low discount rate. That is to say, the financial aid is moderate, and so we're trying to figure out how to juggle that commitment to financial aid and investments in the core enterprise.
Here's wishing you both success.
Okay.
Brown, it's
Good
great to see you.
Thank
Be
you.
healthy
Thank
as well.
you. Thank
Thanks
you.
so much for
Thank
your
you.
time.
Good to see
We
you.
appreciate it. And if you want to comment on those proposed changes we discussed at Title IX, either way, you can do so online through January 28th at federalregister.gov.